Hello, fellow fiends. Welcome to another episode of Creepy Cases and Spooky Spaces. I'm your host, Cassie Opea. So don't forget, you can find new episodes every Friday. And if you subscribe through the Patreon webpage or the anchor.fm website, which is the kind of the main hub of Creepy Cases and Spooky Spaces, you actually get bonus episodes every other Tuesday. You also get early access to episodes, a merchandise discount, and a little bit of thank you swag. So definitely check into that. Don't forget also, if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, you can now catch me on YouTube. Just go in and search Creepy Cases and Spooky Spaces, and it should be the first thing that pops up. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget you can take me along in the car with you on errands, on road trips. If you're working out, you can also throw me in your head. And if you're just doing chores around the house, go ahead and throw me on as well. This week for you, I have a spooky space, and it is one that has quite an interesting history. So, in Dover, Kent, England, overlooking the sea and protecting England's southeastern coast, resides a medieval castle. Now, it's a grade 1, which means that the site it's built on has an exceptional national, architectural, or historical importance. And they're actually pretty rare. Only about 2.5% of historical standing buildings really fall into this category of a grade 1. Most of them are grade 2s. So it's called the key to England due to its defensive significance throughout history. And some sources say that it's the largest castle. However, that title is also claimed by Windsor Castle. And the castle is actually more of a fortress perched on the cliffs of the English Channel. And it has played an important role in British history for more than 950 years. So, with the site dating back to before AD 43, a long and dark history. It was actually used during World War II, and we all know what that means. It's the perfect spot for ghosts of all eras. So, our spooky space this week is Dover Castle. Now, if you've heard the episode on the Tower of London from season 1, you'll recognize the name William the Conqueror. And if you haven't heard that episode, I actually recommend it because it's the Tower of London and it's actually a really awesome spooky space to learn about. I am really into history. I'm sure if you've been listening to the podcast, you know that. And if you're new to the podcast, I'm really into history. Uh, and I really like to learn about the castles and I mean, any kind of history, to be honest. But I love, love, love learning about history in Europe because it is such an extensive history. Now, the site of Dover Castle actually dates back to the Iron Age, and they've actually done excavations, and there's actually proven evidence of Iron Age occupation. And the site also contains one of Dover's, one of two. Yeah, I think it's 2 Roman lighthouses, and actually only 3 are still standing today. But this is also the tallest and most complete Roman structure still standing in England, and it's Britain's oldest building. Now, so back to William the Conqueror. He built the Tower of London, and he actually also built Dover Castle. But from 1179 to 1189, Henry II, he was the first of the Plantagenet kings. He actually built up the castle that that stands now. It's kind of massive. Before it wasn't. It was pretty massive, but Henry definitely added a lot onto it. So, after the Battle of Hastings in October 1066, William and his forces marched to Westminster Abbey for his coronation. And they went through Romney, Dover, and Canterbury. Now, it was this march where Kent actually caught William's attention and earned it the motto of Invicta, which is the Latin word meaning undefeated or unconquered. Now, William then went to Dover, which had been reportedly held by a large force. And after the Normans, greedy for money, set fire to the castle, William paid for the repair and took possession of it himself. Now, William, as we know from the Tower of London episode, was pretty paranoid that someone would attack him. So, to prevent anyone from repeating his own invasion that he had just taken the success on, and to cement his regime and to have castles to stay in while he toured the country, the castle was built largely in stone, and he felt that this would protect the straits, but he would also impress locals and foreigners alike. And he felt that not only would this kind of be a legacy to leave behind, he spared no expense. Now, almost immediately after, in 1067, Eustace of Boulogne actually was someone who was a former ally of William, attacked the castle, but it withstood its first test, and Eustace fled the country. In 1088, 8 knights were appointed under tenure to guard the castle. Now, it was from 1170 to the late 1180s that Henry II really began to build onto the castle, and it began to take shape. The inner and outer bailies, which are basically courtyards, and the Great Keep belong to this time frame. Now, from 1179 to 1188, Henry spent over 6,500 pounds, which was pretty astronomical considering that he only brought in about 10,000 pounds as his annual income, I guess you could call it. Now, Henry built over a castle to kind of rebuild himself, and in honor to Saint Thomas a Becket, after 4 knights in armor burst in and murdered him on the 5th day of Christmas in 1170 and looted his palace. Now, people believe that the murder was done at Henry's ruling. However, Henry was so angered and infuriated and upset by this act that he actually basically holed himself up in his room and refused to see anyone for 3 days after. Now, not many believed his innocence. They all felt that, not all of them, but a lot of them felt that he had a hand in the murder. However, he was finally able to reconcile with the church, but many had turned on him, including his wife and 2 of his sons. And his wife actually ended up a prisoner in her own household for trying to rebel against him. Now, in 1216, a perimeter wall was finished by King John, and he put about 1,000 pounds into the castle and added a D-shaped towers and domestic buildings. Now, local barons actually provided guards on a rotating basis, while local estates provided food provisions for the castle. Now, during the First Barons' War, which ran from 1215 to 1217, a civil war in which Robert Fitzwalter led a group of rebels and took against King John of England. They actually invited future King Louis VII of France to come and conquer the crown. Now, he was able to get inside the walls, but he wasn't successful on taking the castle, and so a truce was actually made. Now, a little while later, a windmill was added to Tower 22, and by the Tudor reign, defenses had been surpassed by gunpowder. Now, Henry VIII actually made a personal visit and added a moat bulwark. In the 1220s, tunnels were built underneath the castle so soldiers could come and go secretly, and it would hold against surprise attacks. But during the English Civil War, the castle was taken by parliaments or supporters of parliaments in 1642, and literally 11 men scaled the walls, attacked, and took over the castle. 11 men. Now, at the end of the 18th century, around the Napoleonic Wars, William Twiss, a general who was a British Army Royal Engineer responsible for the design of many military defenses, actually took on the remodeling of the outer span of Dover Castle. He added the huge horseshoe, the Hudsons, East Arrow, and East Demi bastions, so there would be extra gun positions on the eastern side. Now, Westover becoming a garrison town, which means any body of troops stationed in a particular location originally to guard it. So there was a need for barracks in storerooms for the additional troops and their equipment. Now, Twist created a complex of tunnels about 15 meters below the cliff top. And the first troops to live here moved in about 1803. Now, at the end of the Napoleonic War, the tunnels were partly converted by the Coast Blockade Service for use to combat smuggling. This was done until about 1827 when the main setup and office was moved closer to the shore, and the tunnels were actually abandoned for more than a century. Now, between 1856 and 1858, Anthony Salvin, an English architect who specialized in medieval buildings and structures, built a new officers' barrack on the south side of the castle. He constructed the outside while G. Arnold constructed the inside. Now, in 1939, I know we're fast forwarding quite a ways, with the Second World War going on, the tunnels were used as an air raid shelter and then later as a command center and an underground hospital. After the war, the tunnels were to be used as a shelter for the regional seats of government in the event of a nuclear attack. However, this was short-lived as it was realized that the chalk of the cliffs wouldn't protect from radiation and the tunnels were in pretty poor condition. Now, from 2007 to 2009, the English Heritage actually spent £2.4 million on recreating the castle's interior. Now, history spans back over 2,000 years, so it's no surprise that it's considered to be one of England's most haunted areas. And just like any other spooky space reports, there are disembodied voices heard throughout the night. Doors have also been seen opening and closing by themselves, and unexplained drops in temperatures are also experienced. Now, a camera crew was actually walking past the castle keep one time, and they heard a scream coming from the battlements above, and it sounded as if someone had thrown themselves to their death over the edge. Now, they kept hearing the scream falling toward them, so they all jumped for cover. But as the screams got closer, but then faded out, no body actually landed. Now, visitors to the castle have reported seeing the lower half of a man walking through the doorway of the king's bedchambers. And after being followed, he had disappeared, yet there was no other exit other than the ones that the witnesses had just walked through. Now, being only the lower half of the person, no one knows who they were. Now, in 1990, a staff member actually witnessed a male figure dressed in early 17th century clothing around 8:30 in the morning as she was cleaning the basement area of the keep. She described the man wearing black, wide brim hat with a purple cloak which draped to the floor. And he had long, dark, wavy hair and a mustache. Now, the figure disappeared into nothing after about 30 seconds. Now, another apparition in the keep is a woman wearing a long, flowing red dress. And nobody has been able to see her facial features, but she is heard crying or sobbing. And she's also been seen near the west stairwell in the mural gallery. Now, another ghost that's been seen in the mural gallery is a figure in blue, and they've been seen multiple times, but no one can determine on whether it's male or female. Now, the underground tunnel area, there has been seen a 17th century pikeman carrying a small lance-like weapon. And he's usually seen in the guard room at the furthest end of the tunnel. He was actually seen in 1979. And according to the witness, the soldier wearing a Morian helmet, which is actually the old kind of Spanish helmet type setup, carrying a pike, walked into the room through a wall and out through another wall. And there have been no reports of this specific spirit since. Now, another report from the tunnels inside is that of a male figure in a blue cloak. Now, some believe this is the same figure from the mural gallery, but considering that you can tell this one is male and we're not quite sure if the other one is male or female, there's not really a way to confirm that it's the same spirit. Now, in 1991, a couple visiting heard screams and moans throughout the tunnels, and they actually thought it was an audio playing just to kind of add to the spooky factor. But they spoke to an employee of the castle, and when they were told that they don't use like audio recordings, they were actually quite surprised that they had actually been experiencing paranormal activity. Now, one family tells the story of a spirit that actually was trying to communicate through their son. And on the surface of the castle lands, he was just fine. But anytime that they would visit the underground tunnels, he would become so ill that he actually fainted at one point. And when they returned home, they were looking through photos. They actually found an orb that had kind of been following them through the castle. Now, perhaps the saddest report that I've came across in my research was the figure of the headless drummer boy. And he's actually thought to be Sean Flynn. He was a young drummer during the war who was attacked and beheaded by two soldiers who stole the money that he was carrying while on an errand. And you can actually still hear drumming on the battlement today. Now, if you'd like to visit the Dover Castle, you can do so. It's actually open for tours. I believe you can do self-guided tours, or there are tours with tour guides. Now, it also features a restaurant and a few shops to grab you some of your very own take-home souvenirs. But I'd like to hear, tell me in the comments if you've ever visited the Dover Castle. What was it like? Was it spooky and all the craziness that I would just love to go and be in the middle of? Did you encounter any paranormal activity? And if so, I'd love to hear all about that. But as always, I'm going to end it there. And until next crime. Creepy Cases and Spooky Spaces with Cassiopeia is a Pizza and Pigtails production. All episodes are researched, written, and edited by yours truly. You can find new episodes every Friday, with bonus episodes coming out every other Tuesday. You can find the podcast on your favorite listening platform, or now you can find it on YouTube as well. Don't forget to follow along on social media, creepycases.spookyspaces, for all future news, updates, and maybe some content that you won't find on the podcast. Also, be sure to subscribe so you can get access to bonus content, early access to content, and a couple of little thank you swag. If you'd like to contact me about appearing on a future episode, maybe you would like to suggest your own creepy case or spooky space, or maybe you'd also like to reach out about ad space, you can reach me directly at creepycases.spookyspaces@gmail.com, or feel free to reach out through those social media platforms as well. And as always, see you next crime.